Hi guys, so let's go to our last area of focus, and that's going to be scheduling services. So if we consider the diagrams that we have here, that we could have applications that are talking to gateways, that are also talking to databases to perform CRUD operations, get some data, update some data, do some delete, create some records, or talk to third-party servers, to talk to third parties machines to either do some status checks or get some records or do some fulfillment. It's all happening in this random activity. So the scheduling comes in when we decide that we want to have some operations that are going to take place at a stipulated time frame or stipulated time. A good example, for instance, would be let's say we want to schedule payment of salaries on a particular day, end of month, or the 24th of every month, and at a particular time, which means that when is the 24th or even the 31st of every month, we make payment. So some do 2 weeks or end of month, like everybody, every company how they do it. I'm talking because of places I've worked at. So you realize that when that date is due and that time is due, provided all things being equal, that there's enough money in the bank account of the corporate body, is going to pay all salaries to employers, and then that's a scheduled operation. So it's something that it cuts across a lot in enterprise solutions. So just I'll just have this in mind and keep that, so that I always know where to find my way when I have to design one enterprise solution or an application that really depends on scheduling. Alright, so aside me knowing this landscape in mind, there are also applications that when people build, they call them background processes. It's not different from what you first discussed in the first slide, but the emphasis that that one is more of task or scheduling services, task that has been to set aside to run at a particular time. And then the thinking or the concept also that others use is a background process. And the reason is that if you launch to Windows, for instance, we have a section where you can see all services that run in the background. And the reason I say we are running them in the background is that, you see, if I launch a game, for instance, and if I had a game, for instance, FIFA, if I launch FIFA takes absolute control of my device. You understand? It takes absolute control of my device. So that becomes the active program of my device. If I launch a game like Snake, I'm not much of a gamer, so I don't really have games specifically on my system. But if you are someone who plays a lot of games, you have to take absolute control of your system or your device, so you won't really see other that will be the active program. It's an operating system concept, but I'm not here for operating system class, so I'm not going to stress so much on that, but that's just the understanding of it. So so the background process because, for instance, there are some softwares that when you're using them, examples PDF reader, it gives you prompts of the times that you have to update it. So if you do search, you realize that we have the Foxit PDF reader, which will tell you that you need an update at a particular time. This service is not yet up because they sent me a reminder. I've told them when it should come on. And then so this one is Adobe is actually running, so it will keep your Adobe software up to date. So that's an example of a background process. It will prompt you when the time is due, or to trigger when the time is due. So that brings the notion of a background process. But there's also another client that I have here that actually tells you that it is a background process. 40 client, yeah. 40 client service scheduler to down to also another that is actually telling that it's a scheduler. Yeah, I've used 40 clients is when I want to make secured connections. That's just the basic understanding how that one. I think it's been a while since I used that operating system. It's more of like a VPN service here if you want to make secured connections. So for the service client scheduler, so that one is running. So just for you to know now, all these are services that are running, and that's the idea of a background process or service. So you have an application that you've built, you've deployed it somewhere on a server somewhere, then or not even it may not only be on a server, but you've configured it to also run like as a service to just like Windows services. Yep. It's just running. So till that business agreement is triggered in, the service doesn't show, so it's run as a background process. So let's swing to our IDE and let's just do some 1 or 2 demos of scheduled services. So I have my IDE here, then I'm going to do something. See, I have a public static void main here, and you know that main is where we write most of our code, and it runs once. Once it's hit, is running. So if I have a task, so let's define a task. So what task do we want to define? We want to define a task that says void show or send meeting reminders to investors. Good. So we want to send meeting reminders to investors. So probably there's an agreed meeting date that we've all agreed as investors, that every quarter or every month, every annual investors meeting, a particular date or time. We want to be prompted of our investors meeting, or there has to be some meeting. So that's the task we are going to define. So this is a task, and then inside here is where we define our logic or our flow or our process flow. So here, so many things can happen. Here we can make database calls, or simply CRUD operations take place here. We can call APIs, make API calls that you can speak to some gateways over secured connections. So many things, secured connections, speak to some gateways. We can also consume APIs, consume web services. So many things happen here. Here too, we could also do some custom logic. Let's say some custom logic, like build logic flows here too, and we can also aside doing some custom logic flows, we can also do some you can also show a view if it's possible. Like if it's possible to show a view, we can actually send a view to show a view, or we could, aside show a view, we can prompt, we can send notifications. I don't use notification, but I can do some communication to stakeholders, and that could be via SMS, email, and what have you. So all you need to know is that this is where all the logic takes place, inside this block, but you have to define the tags. So let's do something. Let's have a log here, and then let's log a message that we are sending investors meeting reminders. If I call this in main now, let's call it in main. if I call this in main now, it will run only once. You understand? It will run only once because main just starts from this block of code and ends here, and it gets terminated. And it's complaining. Let's see why is it complaining. Cannot make a static reference to a static method from the type scaling engine. So it's saying that if you are calling anything inside a static method, it also has to be static. So let's make it static. Yep. So it has changed now. So here is static, here too has to be static. Alright. So let's run this and let's see what happens. So you realize that it runs only once. We are sending investors meeting reminders. It runs only once. That's fine. Right. So by now we don't want it to run runs. We want it to be reminding investors as and when we feel like they need to be reminded. So someone says, okay, I can use while true here. That's some programming levels. Someone can also do say while true here. So if you format it, it will run. And let's have it here. We are sending meeting investors. Let's also log when we are done. That's when the whole flow is done. Everything is done. You say we are done sending meeting reminders to investors. Sorry, to investors. Okay, so let's run this to and see with a true insertion. So this one is always running. You understand? It's always running. That's fine, but that's not what the business agreement is. The business agreement is send us meeting reminders so and so 3 days before, 5 days before, that kind of understanding. So you have to do some scheduling. So here we are going to use as scheduled notation. So as scheduled is a notation that is provided by the Spring Boot framework, and the Spring Boot framework has support for scheduling. So we are going to actually just we are going to look at options available. Let's just look at the options available. So let's shut this one down. Okay, so first option is fixed rate. Let's use fixed rate. So fixed rate will schedule it as 6 at a fixed rate. So what period or time does it take? If you check the API documentation for this, it tells you that fixed rate runs has a milliseconds time unit to it. So let's hover over it. And then the Java doc that comes is execute the annotated method with a fixed period between invocations. The time unit is milliseconds. So every 5 milliseconds. So 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds you'll be sending investors meeting reminders, and this is where the whole, so this is not, so when we add, just by adding this, we've now made it we've now changed it to a scheduling service whereby the heart of the application is the is the expression or the time frame agreement. That's it. So that's the heart of the application, and then it cuts across a lot of enterprise solution, but the enterprise have a more refined way of doing it. But let's just test this and see what we'll get. So every 5 seconds you have to say we are sending investor meeting reminders. After 5 seconds you should shut down and say, like, the process should start from here to here and repeat itself every 5 seconds. So let's run this. Okay, so it started already. We are sending investors meeting reminders. Then after 5 seconds we are sending investors meeting reminders fixed rate. Then it will continue. We are sending investors meeting reminders. We are done sending meeting investor reminders. So you can say it's running every 5 seconds, or every 5 seconds, every 5 seconds, every 5 seconds. The tax is doing this work. Alright, so let's close it. Let's end it here. So that's just the fixed rate way. So you can just say that it has been scheduled, but in raw enterprise solution, it's not fixed rate but cron, and cron is the heart of the enterprise solution design. So some call it cron jobs, some too it's mostly called cron jobs because there's another scheduling framework you can use, which is Quartz. I've used both Quartz and are scheduled by Spring. Quartz is quite friendly for the Quartz is not that friendly, but at least it has an enterprise feel. But this one is easier to use, but sometimes it can get complicated, especially the cron expression. But coding in Quartz this coding is quite straightforward as compared to Quartz. Yeah, so this is just those are just by the way, but once that this is the enterprise way. So you have cron expression. So it's the cron expression that's actually the business logic to the task that you want to take place. If you don't get the cron expression right, it's most likely that everything you've written here, sorry to say, is invalid. Because if the cron doesn't kick in when we say it should kick in, and whatever we are doing here, what are we doing? We are not doing anything because we want to schedule the tasks. That's why we are going with scheduling. Some to say is automation. Okay,